Mike G with Locked On UCF. Everybody hit subscribe on both Locked On Big 12 and Locked On UCF. Stay up to date with all things across the Big 12 with the Knights. If things do go wrong for Scott Frost, which is certainly a possibility, we've already said this should work out. Everything points to this being the correct hire for UCF. But if the ship completely sinks, what did go wrong for Frost in Orlando?
Yeah, I think, again, it's going to be about the on-the-field product. If this ship sinks, it's going to be about him consistently losing on the field to his rivals. And, look, nobody expects a year one miracle, even though sometimes they happen in college football. Yeah. But that's the problem. Like, I hate to stop you there, but we look at Sonny Dykes at TCU, or even the year two miracle that Dillingham's put together at Arizona State, or year two in the Big 12 for BYU. Everybody wants to be that program that in year one, year two is winning. And that's set a very bad precedent for UCF because now the clock is already ticking. Yeah. And then when you look at those, what we call toss-up games, right? When you look at those toss-up games, is he winning more of those than he is losing? When it comes down to crunch time, is UCF making the right play? Are players making plays? Are the right calls being made from a coaching standpoint? Or are they fumbling the bag in crunch time? It felt like this year, every time UCF had an opportunity, look at that Arizona State game. That was a game they should have won, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, Scatterboo was out, right? Like that thing was prime for UCF to take, but they could not find plays in a lot of close games. And this is why we talked about this with my guy, Andrew Glucko from the Last Word on Sports over on Locked On UCF. We talked about, okay, what are year one expectations? He says that the floor should be 6-6. I said, with the talent that they should be able to get there, I think the floor should be 7-5. And hiring a coach like Scott Frost should raise your floor about 1 to 2 wins. I think that's a reasonable expectation to say, hey, we want you to finish just above 500 every year. There were fans in our mention saying, that's crazy. The floor is 4. There's no way the floor should be 4 with the talent that they have, right? So I said this on Twitter. Again, follow me at Mike Giddens on Twitter. The difference between an 8-4 team, Drake, and a 10-2 team is probably talent, right? The guys who recruited just a little better than you did, and they had, that one playmaker that you didn't have. I cover Auburn as well, too. Cam Coleman, top 5 overall player in high school, he decommitted from Texas A&M, right? And then he committed to Auburn. And then when Texas A&M played Auburn, Cam Coleman torched them for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns as a true freshman. If you're getting those kids, they can be the difference. But the difference between 5-7 and 8-4 is coaching.
Yep.
There are not a ton of teams in college football that don't have enough talent to win 6 games. Yeah. If you're not winning 6, it's because you're failing as a coach. And that's what I think the Scott Frost effect, call it the Frost warning, frostbite, whatever moniker we would attach to that, should be good for 7-5, at worst 6-6 every year. And then the progress should be there so that when they do get that one piece, that one transformational player, you're over the hump, man. And in a 12-team playoff era, there's a much wider margin for error than there has ever been. UCF should be able to make a 12-team playoff more years than not. The back end of that playoff, come on, Drake. 12 teams. Do it.
Yeah, it's with a recruiting base in Florida, you're there, right? You've got to be. It's a different standard in Morgantown, West Virginia, given you don't have the hotbed locally. There aren't kids within 30 minutes of you who could win at the Power 5 level. But in Orlando, you have to. It's a gift that you are given as the head coach at UCF. Mike, what did Gus Malzahn do in his last couple of years at UCF that Scott Frost must avoid to not only keep a bad taste in Knights' mouths, but also to completely make the program his own?
It's quarterback development.
Okay.
And it plagued Gus his entire career. Yeah. But you could see when Gus was able to find that transformational quarterback, it was championship run time. Yeah. And you got to stop pretending that you can have game managers back there in some of these systems, right? In Gus's system, you needed a dude. You needed a Cam Newton, which we saw how that looked in 2010. You needed a Nick Marshall. You needed a Jarrett Stidham, right? Yep. When he got those guys, he was on fire. If you're Scott Frost, you can't do what Gus did. You can't bring in KJ Jefferson and then bench him before midseason. Yeah. Wild. No way. There's no way. And you know the money that they had to shell out for an SEC starting quarterback to come into UCF and then not win games. And then you go to Ja'Cory Brown and EJ Colson. Colson clearly doesn't look ready. Ja'Cory Brown is a dynamic runner, but again, at the end of BYU, he was just throwing interceptions. Now you're on your fourth quarterback. And I commend Gus for having the balls to go to Dylan Risk. Great last
Who played pretty well, by the way.
Yes,
he played pretty good.
I thought he did enough to earn an opportunity at the end of that BYU game. He led a touchdown drive when they could not. And they went to him. And look, man, moving forward, he was big versus Arizona. I think he had a 300-yard game and 3 touchdowns. But ultimately, just too much dysfunction there. In today's college football, if you don't have dynamic quarterback play, you have to be perfect everywhere else to compete for championships. And the only examples that I think we've seen of that in the last few years has probably been 2021 Georgia.
Yeah.
With the first iteration of Stetson Bennett and last year's Michigan. Yep. Right. Where quarterback play, where you had somewhat of a game manager back there, but everything else was good enough for you to win a championship, meaning you had a championship level defense and you had a great run game and wide receivers can go up and make a play for
McCarron, McElroy. Bama did this for a long time under Saban. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, but when Nick Saban hired Lane Kiffin, he understood the shift that was happening in college football. He said, I got to catch up with tempo. 3 yards in a cloud of dust football isn't going to work anymore. And then Bama became quarterback man. Yep. I think at one point, last year they had 4 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Yeah. Last year, a year before, between Bryce Young and our guy.
Mac Jones and Tua, and the list goes on.
Yeah,
Jalen Hurts. You include Hurts in that if you want to. Yeah,
NFL MVP, man. Yep. But that's not what they were before in the first few championships that they won. Today's college football demands dynamic quarterback play, and if you don't have it, and if I would go as far to say, some people may think this is a hot take. If you don't have 2 guys that can do the job, you're playing with fire. Because most of these teams are 1 injury away from their entire season tanking.
Utah.
Right? Yeah. If you don't have a guy behind, and Utah was picked to win the Big 12, and they finished dead last. Come on, man. You got to have 2 guys that can do it. And I think that if you're Scott Frost, that you hire Mackenzie Milton because you hire a guy who knows what it's like to win every football game he played in the season. And you got to get this right, because that's Gus. That's where I think Gus, it was over for Gus when KJ Jefferson didn't work out. Yeah. Because he didn't have a guy on the roster that could come in and save a season. And I think it's a terrible place to be as a coach when you need a quarterback to save you. And they can't have that under Frost. You got to have a solid D, and you've got to get playmakers around your quarterback. Go out and find those guys in the portal if you can't get them from high school, and make sure that you have a cushion for your backup. If your dynamic starter gets hurt or just isn't playing well, you've got to. If you don't have it, you're playing with fire here, Drake. Yeah.
Mike, before we get you out of here, where can folks find more of your work, more of your coverage of UCF and overall in college football?
Check us out over on Locked On UCF. We are on fire, Drake, but we need your help to get to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're just under 600 right now. We've been at it less than 2 months, but we're pumping out some great content for you guys over at Locked On UCF. So follow me at Mike Gittins on Twitter for a lot of great Locked On UCF content. And when you see us, drop a comment, drop a like, drop everything, and watch Locked On UCF.
We'll be covering UCF and the rest of the teams in the Big 12 the rest of this week and all off season as well at Locked On Big 12 and Locked On UCF. Thanks for watching or listening today. This has been and always will be Locked On UCF and Doce Grande.